promise, we will have everyone at the board meeting by 7:30. My name is Tom Murphy, Director of Finance for the Eden Central School District, for anyone who does not know me at this point. And our Superintendent, Sandy Anselm, will also be speaking at some points throughout the night. But what we wanted to do is have the first of two community forums. And really, it's chance, number one, just to, at least for the first meeting, to hear a little bit on the background of what we are looking at in terms of our budget and how we are creating our budget and what's going on with the state, how that impacts us. The second community forum really will get more into the nitty-gritty of what we're looking at in terms of a deficit and what the administrative team has come up with in terms of funding the best academic program for students. So let me just start by saying thank you very much for coming out. It's a cold night. It's cold in this room too, but as they say, sometimes students learn very well when it's cold inside because for whatever reason why. And maybe Kelly or someone else can say instructionally why cold is better for people, but I've heard that many times. I don't know if it's a fallacy or not. But
well, I'm cold.
It is cold in here. That is for absolute sure. So thank you very much for coming. First of all, what I want to do is just go over a little bit about what we're going to go over tonight. So we're going to take a look at the aid that school districts receive. And the bulk of the aid that school districts receive is called foundation aid. And it's really aid you can use in almost any way you need to support your educational program. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, how it has changed over the past 7 years and what the impact has been on our district. Next, we spoke about this often last year, but the gap elimination adjustment. And the gap elimination adjustment was basically the state's way of balancing their budget deficit issues that they had. So they went out to school districts, municipalities, and said, we can't afford to give you the state aid we've given you in the past. We have a gap. We need to eliminate our gap. We're going to adjust your budget. Gap elimination adjustment. And what that has meant to our district over the past couple of years. Next, what has been in the news for the past couple of weeks, the governor for the first time has not released state aid runs for schools. Unprecedented, never happened. What does that mean for us? And it does have implications, and I'll talk about that. Our timeline, and we'll go over where we've been, where we're headed for the remainder of the year. The budget tax cap. In addition to the foundation aid and the gap elimination adjustment, the governor has also put into place a tax cap. And I'm sure many people have heard, okay, taxes can't go up more than 2%. Just, if I can, just to show our hands, if anyone who's heard that before, the taxes should not be going up more than 2%. Anyone heard that? Okay, so it has been very well publicized that there's a tax cap of 2%, but 2% is not 2%. I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. Then we'll look at last year where we've ended, actually the current year right now, but the budget process was last year. And then what we're going to be looking at for this coming year. Okay?
So Tom, will there be time for questions at the end? What are you shooting for?
We will try to have the presentation done, God willing, at 7:15, which will leave time for question and answers. If we don't get through every question and answers, I have my cards with me. Anyone can certainly email me, call me, whichever, and we will answer every question that's out there. And we have another community forum coming up March 14th.
Barb Thomas-Dulo, who's our district clerk, is taking notes. Could we put those questions and answers on the website too?
Sure.
Okay, so that you have another chance to see them. Okay. Thank you.
Lucinda, do I have enough room to walk around with the microphone a little bit?
You could try.
You'll know.
Okay, because some of what I'm going to actually show you, I actually do want to go up to the screen a little bit and point some things out because I think it'll make more sense if you can actually see what I'm looking at. Thank you. Okay, no, I don't need a lot of room, but okay, I've got enough room. Okay, foundation aid. As I said, foundation aid is our primary state funding source. Just be careful over there that we don't pull anything out.
That's as far as it goes.
Okay, I've got enough room, so I'm good. Okay, so state aid, we have foundation aid, and we have also categorical aids. And categorical aids are aid that you receive on expenditures you've had from previous year. For example, if you have a building, a capital project, you get aid back on that for either 15 or 20 years, depending on the type of project that you have. For your transportation spending, you get aid back on that as well. Those are called categorical aids based on what you've actually spent, and you'll get money back the following year based on that and your aid ratio in that category. But foundation aid is the biggest pot of state monies that we actually get, and again, there's no restriction on those dollars. And what they say is this is what you have coming back to you based on your student population, based on your wealth factor. There's a lot of factors that the state actually has into the formula, so I'll show you just a real briefly. Anything that you deal with the state is a lot of different steps and formulas to it. But when you take a look at the foundation aid, the state starts out with a base formula of what you'll get every year, and then when they're all said and done, you come up with the aid you actually get per year. So if you take a look, our aid has been fluctuating anywhere from about $6.1 million to last year's $6.6 million. So what we got in state aid, foundation aid last year was $6.6 million. Now, what's interesting is this foundation aid, the state said years ago, we don't have all the money we need to give you the full foundation aid you should actually have. We're going to phase it in over time, and we'll have you up and running in a couple years, 3 to 4 years, and you'll have your full aid and you'll be all good. Well, now, it's been 7 years since foundation aid has been around, and I'm going to show you this column in a second. We are still not made whole. The state is still not giving us our full foundation aid if we were fully phased in, which they said we would be by this point in time. And what does that mean for our district? If you take a look in 2007, 2008, we got in foundation aid from the state, 2007, 2008, $6.1 million. We should have received, according to their formula, $7.8 million. So what they said is, what you have coming to you, 7.8, can't afford it, we're giving you 6.1, or a shortfall of $1.6 million in 2007, 2008. Now if you look at each year, we've actually, it's fluctuated. We were at a high of a shortfall in 2009, 2010 of 2.9, almost $3 million in foundation aid. They didn't increase any other lines to make up for that. It's just a shortfall, and you, the district, have to figure out a way to make up that differential. This past year, we had in foundation aid a difference, or a shortfall of $1.3 million just in the foundation aid. For the 8 years, I believe that is right there, we are just shy of $17 million in foundation aid. So basically what that means, we, the district, have had to make tough choices for 8 years, $17 million worth of tough choices to say the money we were supposed to have, we don't have. And I'm sure, I mean, every year we know we have had shortfalls, and everyone's been at the budget meetings, everyone has heard, everyone knows. It is not an easy choice. And I've said this before, this is my own personal opinion and a district opinion, so I will say that right now. I will say it throughout the entire process. I do believe when we take a look at the different state aid shortages that we have, I believe that there is a concerted effort to put pressure on districts. And I do believe, personally, that the governor has a plan to take the number of school districts, which is just under 700, and reduce that almost by half.
Half, he has said half. Oh my
So one way to reduce the number of school districts is starve them of cash. And eventually, someone's going to run out of money. And as we have heard over the last couple of weeks, we have 3 Western New York school districts out of 700 across the state, 3 which have made the top 10 list of fiscal stress. And we're not on it, which is really good. And it's a testament to everyone here, because you guys have made tough choices to not be fiscally stressed. We're not right now. We're actually in a good spot because the tough choices have been made. However, it's not stopping anytime soon. So keep in mind that number 1.3. Because next, what we look at is gap elimination adjustment. How many have heard of gap elimination adjustment? Almost everyone. And I've just had a meeting today with business officials, and one thing they said is with the gap elimination adjustment, most districts last year did a pretty good job of letting people know of this shortfall, specifically gap elimination adjustment. And almost every district said the same thing. You keep promising to give us back what you're taking. And they're not. And almost all districts went to their elected officials, their articles in the paper, and you heard that sounding cry last year, which is, I think, why almost everyone in this room said they heard about it. This year, now, I'll tell you, there is a split among school districts. What do we ask back for? Do we ask for foundation aid back? Do we ask for the gap elimination adjustment back? As you see, $1 million shortfall last year in the GEA, gap elimination adjustment. We had 1.3 million shortfall in foundation aid, so it's not really clear which one we'd be better off getting back. Honestly, we'd be best off getting it all back. We're not going to get it all back. The state this year had about a $5 billion lawsuit settlement with Swiss Bank, I think it was, and so the state has no fiscal stress this year. In fact, they have a surplus, a one-time surplus. They really don't know what to do with at this point in time. So you have everyone lobbying to say, what can we do to restore funding? Because schools aren't the only ones who are in trouble with funding from the state. I mean, municipalities are, anyone who receives state funding is saying, please, you have taken from us for years, we need some of it back. So the state is trying to figure out, number one, politically what works best. Number two, how do you divert some of that money downstate? Because there has been a very concerted effort, again, my opinion, and actually figures do support that as well, that a lot of money has shifted from Western New York right downstate. So we don't know what's going to happen. And to make matters even tougher is the governor has said with any budget figures for next year, not even restoring the GEA, not even giving us more foundation aid, but he's not even talking any increases at this point in time until some of his reform agendas with APPR and tying it into some other agendas he wants to see happen. And if they don't happen, he's saying, we're not really talking an increase in aid. Now he's put out there, maybe some school budgets can, school districts can budget like a 1.7% increase in foundation aid. You can, but I gotta tell you, given what the governor's done, I don't know if that's necessarily the prudent course of what we actually wanna do. If we say we're gonna get more foundation aid early in the process, and we say we're gonna have more money, and it does not come through, not only are we gonna, the whole first time, go through tough choices, we're gonna have to do another round of it right before the budget's actually due. I don't think that's necessarily a smart move to do. You start off conservative, and then if he comes through and says, we'll give you more money, we haven't done that a lot lately, but if they do, then we can pull back. So again, just want to show you with gap elimination adjustment, what that was is, again, the state had said, foundation aid, you're supposed to be fully phased in. We didn't do that. We couldn't afford it. In 2010, actually 2009, they said, you know what, we really don't even have that much money for the foundation aid. We're really in trouble. That is when we had the stock market crash and there were a lot of tough times on Wall Street, which then moved on down to the rest of the state. So they said, that's just not enough. So now we need to put a second take back, and we call it gap elimination adjustment. So 2010 was the first year. Over the course of 5 years, the state has taken back $7 million. Last year, the state has said, you know what? Well, and they've done it for the past couple of years. Again, Governor Cuomo has been very good in PR. And last year he said, your GEA was supposed to be $1.25 million. But I'm in a generous mood. I'm going to give money back to school districts. That right there was our amount that he gave back. In the end, what you see is there's not a give back. They're just taking less away. They were going to take away $1.2 million. They took away $1 million. So they still took away. So I mean, let's not mince words. There was money taken away and nothing given back actually on that. I mentioned almost everything the state does is very complex formulas. What I want to show you is not this page, but the next page. Because I think what's interesting are there are two graphs right here. And let me show you these two graphs. Okay, here's the first graph. This first graph right here is total formula-based aid. If you look all the way over on the left, this is 2008, 2009. This is all formula aid, so this is all the aid that we're getting from the state, not just foundation aid. We're at $11 million in 2008, 2009. If you look at 14, 15, $9.9 million. We are not even at where we were in 2008, 2009. And they promised every year we're going to bring you back up to at least where you were in 2008, 2009. We're still struggling just to try and get back what they said they were actually going to get. So that's a little over $1 million right there. the second one won't come through, but so I'll go backwards. And I had this pop out too, but it won't pop out. Public enrollment estimates, and really what you see in 2007-8 for our district, 1704, 2013-14, 1498. So really, what we're looking at now with these shortages from the state aid, we are actually seeing now we need to make up deficits and do that in an environment where we have declining enrollment. So looking at that, if your budget goes up and you have a declining enrollment, you have to make some tough choices, because how do you keep spending more with less students? And it has been a conundrum that all districts across the state have been facing for, well, pretty much 7 years. Okay, so in summary of this, the governor's impact. What has that meant for our district? State aid frozen at $6.6 million, or a loss of $1.3 million last year. GEA left intact. They still took away $1 million from us, so another loss of $1 million. The total loss last year was $2.3 million, 2.354. And given what the governor has said, his failure for the first time to release, and I'm going to read this because I feel this is actually very important to read. The governor's failure for the first time to release state aid calculations tied into the state plan to change APPR means revenue projections are at best inaccurate projections. So what we start with is we can say, you really can't go above what you knew your facts were from last year. So if you knew what your aid was last year, you don't know if they're going to move it at all. You base your deficit on what you're spending, what you're bringing in. If you don't know exactly what you're bringing in, it's hard to make a really good plan if you can't say with certainty, here's how much you're actually going to get.
I think an important point, I'm just gonna leave to you, is that we don't have a credit card. Because all
No.
of us have credit cards.
No, school districts years ago used to, at the end of the year, if they didn't have a balanced budget, they can borrow money to get through that year to get them into the next year. The state has changed the rules and said you cannot end your year in a negative, period. So you have to live within your budget, otherwise you're basically broke and you're out of business. I will tell you, the state has seen some districts, and I will say Niagara-Wheatfield was definitely in the news for year after year of not being able to do that. The state has not stepped in as of yet to say we're going to take over a district, but once you go in that red, they have every right to come in and take over a district. And probably, again, my opinion is in a couple of years, as more school districts become in that fiscal stress of being in deficit, then we're going to see some change in some plan to convert districts somehow. I don't know what that would look like. So, again, we have a pretty good handle on what we're going to spend. We don't have a good handle on what we're going to bring in. So we estimate the best we can, but again, it's an inaccurate projection because the figures are unknown. The way the process has worked in the past is in January, the governor would say, here's what you're going to get for your aid next year. It's a starting point. It's the low point. Because then the legislature kicks in, everyone says, wait a minute, this isn't what you said it would be. There's a lot of political wrangling going on. 3 men in a room. This year, one of the 3 men in the room is not president, as I'm sure most of you know. In March, typically, then a revised budget would come out from the legislature. If that's going to happen this year, it is extremely doubtful that that will even happen. So again, we're, for the most part, left with what we have. So tax levy projections, tax levy, that's the amount you guys pay. So our budget last year was $26.3 million. You guys cannot fund the entire budget. We have aid here, we have other funding sources as well, but the portion you pay, the tax levy, basically is the difference of all of our other funding sources and what we need to spend to continue business. So again, last year, the tax levy was $13 million, $13.2 million. So tax levy projections are based on estimated revenues. And if you don't know some of your estimated revenue lines, it becomes difficult to say with real clear picture what the tax levy should be. But while it's tough for us to say what the tax levy should be, the governor has also implemented a couple years ago the tax cap. So even if you don't know what your tax levy needs to be to support instruction, you still have to come up with, by March 1st, without information, what your tax cap is going to be. So we have in a couple days, and we've already calculated this, and I'll show you in a second, we have to tell the state what it is our tax levy will go up next year, without any information as to what the state's actually gonna do. If we don't do this, we're in trouble with the state. So we have to give them exactly what we're going up next year. So that's fun, let me tell you. I'll get to that in a second. I just want to show you with our budget advisory team, and actually our second year for the budget advisory team, and I think it has been a wonderful process, and I hope everyone on the budget advisory team feels the same way. It is really, I think, a great way to impart information to various constituencies in our district. So parents, community members, board members, staff, and talk about the budget. Let them know what is comprised of the budget, and also to get ideas. What are things that we aren't thinking of? Because as an administrative team, as a board, we can't think of everything. We can't think of every idea. So last year, it was wonderful in terms of coming up with ideas, and it's already working very well this year as well. We've been meeting since December, so we've looked at revenues over the past couple of years. We look at all of our departments, so technology, finance, athletics, buildings and grounds, transportation. Today we had Director of Curriculum Instruction and the building principals. Also tonight our community forum, and March 4th. And also, these meetings are open to everyone. Anyone who wants to attend, please, I welcome everyone to, because we want everyone to know as much about the budget as possible. And they're usually at 5:45 in the cafeteria on the dates, except if you see notations like community forum tonight at 6:30. March 4th, our next one, we'll talk about PPS, pupil personnel, which includes special ed, the BOCES budget, and we'll start talking about staffing. We have a community forum, March 14th, which is a Saturday at 10 a.m. in the cafeteria, where we will go over our first run of the budget in its entirety, and then have comments as well on that. March 18th, draft 2 of the budget. April 7th, draft 3. We are looking tentatively to adopt a budget that night. We have, by law, we have to adopt by April 21st, 22nd, by law. Then public hearing on May 5th, with the vote on May 19th. So again, tax cap, which we have to let the state know by the 1st. One of the things that the state has said very clearly is, again, 2% is 2%. That mantra has been out for years now. 2% is not 2%, plain and simple, almost for any district. Because what you'll see down below is the state, again, has a formula in calculating your tax levy. They don't just say, you're all at 2%. What they say is, we're going to start with either 2% or the lower 2% and CPI and all these other things. So I'm telling you right now, years ago when this started, almost every district wanted to stay within the 2%, regardless of whether or not their tax cap was 2%, 1%, 5%, 10%.
The number 2. You're saying the number
2%,
Yeah.
correct. And the reason why is because, again, it was so drilled into everyone that 2% was 2. And if anyone went over 2%, people were very suspicious of districts saying, wait a minute, you're taxing us more than you actually need to. The governor said it was 2%. And it's not. And I think what people have seen over the last, I think it's 3 years now, is that you hear time and again of districts who are going out. Niagara-Wheatfield is a good example. They went out at 10% one year, 7%, 5%. The numbers have been all over. So I think people now are starting to realize 2 is not necessarily 2, but it is this formula right here. And I'll go over in a couple sheets. But see all these lines? You follow this, and it's pretty much like connect the dots. It's really, there's no room for us to deviate from what they've set out here. You punch in your numbers, it gives you your number, and there you go.
So could you take just a moment, and maybe you're going there on the next one anyways. Why is Eden under 2, like last year, but over 2 next year?
Because, again, they start with CPI. So last year, the CPI was 1.46%. This year, it's 1.66%. Then they allow you, again, other exclusions, and I'll go through all this. But again, that changes your bottom line number. So I've got a couple slides to at least show you.
What's CPI?
Consumer Price Index. Basically what the cost of goods are going up, what the inflation rate is with that as well. Okay? So, basically, and I'll do this real quick, so when you take a look at your prior year's levy multiplied by a growth factor, which they set, they tell you what the growth factor is, plus any pilots received during last year. Pilots are payment in lieu of taxes. Not every corporation necessarily has to pay taxes if they've worked out some agreements to give money in pilot form instead of taxes. Minus taxes levied for certain exemptions, court orders, pension increases above a certain percent, gives you an adjusted prior year levy, multiplied by the allowable levy growth factor, the CPI, minus pilots expected for the coming year, plus additional carryover, equals the tax levy limit, plus coming year exemptions, equals your district maximum allowable levy. Simple. Okay, so let me just walk you through that here and what this actually means. It's about 3 or 4 slides. I promise I'll try and not make this painful because it is painful. Prior year levy, what you guys have paid for the budget, $13.2 million. Multiplied by the growth factor the state sets out and tells you what it is, in which case this here is 1.0059, so that 13.2 becomes $13.3 million. Plus any pilots we received last year, we didn't, so that's 0. Minus any taxes levied for exemption, court orders, we had none. Equals the adjusted prior year tax levy, again, 13.3. Multiplied by the allowable growth level, 2% or CPI, whichever's less. So 1.62. Sorry, I think I said 1.66. It's 1.62 this year. Gives you 13,571,362 minus any pilots you expect to receive this year. We don't. Plus carryover, if any. We don't have any. Gives you your tax levy, 2.21. That's what we're looking at for this year.
Maximum.
That's, she said, maximum. Not necessarily. And I'll talk about that in 1 second. Plus any coming year exemptions, we have none. Again, going back to your maximum allowable levy, so 2.21% or 13.571. This year we're at 13.2. Next year would be 13.5. About $300,000. Most of that, I will tell you right now, is eaten up with healthcare increases. Almost immediately. Right there. Because if healthcare goes up anywhere 7 to 10%, that's almost a full amount. That's giving you just a brief overview of that. She said, superintendent, that maximum 2.21. Is that the maximum? How many think it's the absolute maximum we could have? Right. It's not necessarily the maximum. This is the maximum to stay within your tax cap, which means, in a regular vote, you can go up to 2.21, and the voters would vote on it, and the majority then would vote in the budget. If you want to go above, anywhere above that, if you want to go 2.2%, you now need 60%. I think they call it a plural majority. 60% of voters saying, well, we don't care what the governor said, we're overriding that, and we're going to go above it. I will tell you, I think almost every district that has gone out over the past 2 years have failed going above what?
So
The tax levy limit.
Holland did it last year, and they passed. But I would say that 96% of the districts that went out failed. Because in addition to all this that Tom is talking about, there was a new thing that was added in last year, that check you got. Can you talk about that for a moment?
The governor has incentivized
That's right.
everyone in this room to make sure that we stay within our tax cap. If you stay within your tax cap, probably you have to be a homeowner, but homeowners last year would have received a check in the mail, which came out surprisingly right before November elections,
That's right, yeah.
a couple weeks before. Some were 10, some were 20, some were 50, it just depends on your assessed value of the house.
That's right.
To stay within the tax cap. This coming year, same thing. But now we also have to demonstrate that we are saving money, at least 1% of our tax levy for the next 3 years. So they're really honing in and finding ways to constrain districts. I'm not saying it's all bad.
And
because
municipalities too.
correct, absolutely.
And the reason I say that is because if it was not happening to the town of Eden, we might be able to lean on the town of Eden, or vice versa. But because it's happening to both of us at the same time, we're both feeling the squeeze.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying that it isn't good to be fiscally conservative. It isn't good to make sure people aren't overtaxed. It is good to make sure people aren't overly taxed. I'm conservative. I don't want to be taxed more than what I should be. But at what point do you say it's too much of a cut? There's too much of an impact on the kids. So this is what we live with. So this is what we're at. We'll talk a little bit more at the board meeting tonight with the board members as we have to certify this by the 1st, again, without knowing how much we're getting back from the state. So for 14-15, just to review, our budget, we've talked about this already, is 26.396. So 26,396,480. Our spending from the prior year increased $676,000 or 2.62%. And I want to point something out. If you notice, our spending increased 2.62%, but our tax cap was 1.78. And CPI was again 1.46. But our tax cap, the amount the levy could go up was 1.78. Our spending is the overall big pot. Again, that's more than just the taxpayer money. It's the state money, it's grants, it's everything else in there. So you will not necessarily, and I don't think you'll ever see this, see the tax levy increase be exactly the same as the spending level increase, because the spending level increase is the entire pie. The tax levy is a portion of that pie.
Hey, Tom.
Yes,
I do have something I'd like to bring to everyone's
Please.
attention now that they're here.
Barb Henry, board member, for those who don't know.
One thing I've learned about doing this budget is this little nice little booklet I have. It has everything in it for people to really understand.
Yes,
And maybe you don't like having everyone know this information.
No,
but it's
we want people to know
very,
this.
very, very transparent. Just let them read this book. And
Sure.
one of the things I'd like people to know is the top 10 taxpayers are not residents. It's National Fuel, Tennessee Gas, Eden Heights, Verizon, the B&B Welch Association, Schreiber Wickleman, George Palace Properties, and Jane Baird Property. They're the top 10 taxpayers, not us. So I just want to, that's part of our community also. And like you said, the other really important factor is the town is also stressed. It's not just the schools. It's
Absolutely.
Everyone.
Towns, villages,
Everyone.
school districts, all municipalities are living within this. Okay, looking forward, and as said, by 7:15 we'd be done. We'll definitely meet that, which is good. Looking forward, impact items affecting our school district for the coming year. Number one, this is probably not a large surprise to many people in this room. Others, this may be the first time hearing it. Our demographics are changing. As kids are enrolling, first of all, we have a declining enrollment, you saw that. But as new kids are coming into the district, there is a greater proportion of students with special needs. So we have fewer general education students, more students either with special ed or other considerations that they need to have, like additional test accommodations, other things like that. When you start having more special education students, the simple fact is it costs us more to educate students. It's not a bad thing, it just is, because there are more supports that are actually needed. So, as you have more special education or higher needs and less of the lower needs, you now are shifting what you're looking at. So the cost for a student now is actually going up. So as we look at that, we're spending more money for the same students. Okay?
I think it's important just to state that it's not just Eden.
No.
When we start to poll districts around us, and Sean Johnson, who's in charge of our PPS department, has done this as well, what we see is this is happening in many, many districts around us. And so we don't really understand what that is just yet. We can tell you that there's more mental health issues in very young children, more behavioral issues in very young children, more troubles in turning in form of trying to learn, but different types of disabilities than what I might have seen as a special ed teacher even 15 years ago. So it's not just Eden. But what is germane to Eden is that our population overall is declining. That's happening in other districts too. But we have gone from, in this building alone, class size of close to 150, 160 to an incoming class of about 119 in this building alone. And that's a really big deal, because when you take a look at a kindergarten class that might be at 150, and now we're looking at a kindergarten class of 78, it costs more to do the same thing with fewer people. And so a really smart mom on the phone yesterday said to me, don't our children have a right to take these type of courses? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just as angry about it as you. But if there's only 3 people in a particular high-level course, a particular elective, it costs us more money to do that. And given everything that Tom has just talked about, with the declining enrollment and the fiscal stresses on districts, we have to make those tough choices, and it's not something we want to do. We can't just raise the taxes anymore.
Yep.
Right.
I'm sorry, Sammy, I'm confused. If there's less students, shouldn't there be more money per student? How does
I'm gonna
that
let
work?
Tom
I
answer
must
that.
Not,
understand
not fully.
the point.
So let's say, for instance, you have 80 in a grade. And you have, let's say, 20 students in 4 classes, or 80. Just because that number now drops to 76 or 75, can't get rid of a teacher, because now your classes would be 35. So you can't just say less students means just cut, because now the classes are manageable, you can't do it anymore, until it gets down so low, but you now are forced to pay more per student because there are less students, even though you may have some of the same staff.
Some of your expenses might be lower. So I think that that's a really good point. So you take it like in my household. If I had 5 children in my house and I divided that by my mortgage payment, then it's costing me this much for 5 kids. But as each one leaves to go off on their own, it's costing me more per child. I might have a less expense on food, but I doubt it because they're coming back. Okay? So I really doubt that. But so that's what Tom is saying. We get less money per child,
Mhm.
but yet, let's say that I want to have a class of 22. And rather than being able to fund 2 classes of 22, now I have 29 kids, but I'm still going to make it 2 classes because I don't want to make it one of 29. And that's where it becomes more expensive per child.
And what you look at, you may have some costs go down just slightly, but in education, about 75% of our costs are staffing. We are a people industry. And if you can't reduce the number of people because the kids have gone from 80 to 76 and you just still can't get rid of a staff at all, you don't want to anyway. So, but if you can't do that part of it, then you still have same expenses, actually a little bit higher when you have healthcare going out, contracts, all that. And I'll get to you in 1 second, Bart. And you still have more costs, but you're getting less money back because we're partially funded based on the number of students as well.
Question and answer.
In about 1 minute, I'm almost done with the presentation. Or if I can, I'll go to you first and then right over.
Just relative to what her question was, is there any connection to the attendance and how much aid we get?
There is not.
So if we have 8 kids, we still get the same aid as if we had 100?
We used to have, I believe it was a 95% threshold that we used to need to meet. Now the state says basically you're responsible for having a class, not necessarily getting the kids in the seat.
Okay.
Okay? So, looking at that, since it now is costing us more per student, our pie isn't really growing. I will say, I've said this phrase since the first day I started here, the pie is the pie. If you have a $26.5 million budget, it doesn't change. We don't get any more money no matter what our costs are. So the pie is the pie. So if we have costs going up, the only way we're able to do it is cut somewhere else to make up for the pie. Because you still have a $26.5 million pie, it doesn't change. 2, technology needs are increasing, including infrastructure. 3, aging transportation fleet requires a focus on rebuilding and stabilizing our fleet. For those who have been at the past several board meetings, this will be absolutely no surprise that the Department of Transportation has taken several of our buses offline this year. We have been working diligently to not only make sure there's an adequate, healthy fleet for this year, next year, and then a long-term plan as well.
And that extends out into other things that we see at our homes, but we don't necessarily think about at school. We still need to plow. So we still need a plow, which is probably bigger than what I have at my home. We still need a lawnmower, which clearly is 100 and some acres here, minus some of the trees in the swamp. But But so there are things that we have not been purchasing since all of this has started, since 2008, 2009. And kudos to our administrators for being able to do that, but what we're starting to see now is with aging buses, aging dump truck, aging all this equipment, is our repair lines are going up and up, just as it would with your car. The longer you keep your car, the more something's gonna go wrong, and all of a sudden you're paying more than you would have for a car payment each month. So that's what we're starting to see. But the reason I give credit to our administrators is because they were trying to funnel the money that we had into students' instruction and not into equipment needs. And that's,
But
we're
equipment needs
now at a
are for
crossroads.
students.
Yep, we're at a crossroads where we can't function without the infrastructure.
Now, at the risk of sounding like a gloomy Gus for the entire evening, because what we wanted to do is just let you know the environment in which we're working in. We're certainly not alone in what we're looking at. One of the main tenets that we set out last year with the budget advisory team and with all of our community forums and with the community as a whole. If you're looking at a backdrop where the governor keeps squeezing and keeps forcing you to make tough choices in an effort to eventually force you to go broke, there's one or two things you can actually do. And last year, the district took the second. I'm going to tell you what the two are. Number one, you fight for the scarce resources and say, don't touch my program, touch someone else's. I need what I've got. The second way is, we're all in this together. We know we have to overcome the deficits. We know we have a tough job ahead of us. Last year, as a whole, this district said, we are in this together. And you could definitely tell, the districts that are not in it together are in fiscal stress today because they're not working together. And they're fighting for their own areas. And that is what causes problems, because if there's no give, you overspend. You overspend, you go broke. Simple as that. This district has very clearly said, and it's evident based on where we're at and very low fiscal stress, thank God, that every year you guys come together. You guys say, we know it is not fun. We know going forward in this process this year, there will be tough choices that we make. We try to minimize that as much as possible. We ask tonight, the next community forum, any of the budget advisory meetings, the board meetings, we're in this together. And we all want the exact same thing, what's best for kids. And so what I wanted to highlight here is, despite the challenges, every year, we continue to provide a quality education for our students by, one, increasing the academic rigor and raising expectations for all students. It's amazing we're able to do that with more and more pressure, but we are increasing the rigor. Two, effectively implement the Common Core standards. And three, strengthening the culture of the district by building greater trust through improved communication among all school community stakeholders. Part of what we're doing here tonight, it's part of what we do every year. Our pledge to you is our doors are open, even if not literally, email, phone. We want to hear what you guys have to say. We'll take some question and answer
This
up
will
to...
be up on the website.
This will be on our website. We'll take a few question and answer now. We will be back in the board meeting at 7:30. Anything we don't get to now, we do have another community forum, March 14th. It's a Saturday at 10 a.m. We want to do one during the week, one on the weekend. We also will be more into the numbers of our budget at the next one as well. So, first of all, questions.
Three, I asked three.
You can ask whatever you want.
One, of the total budget.
Mhm.
uh,
Spending budget.
Of the total district spending budget.
Mhm.
Is the non-discretionary aid in that budget?
Non-discretionary spending? Like-
All the aid, all the special aid.
No, special aid is not in there. Special aid are grants. Those are
It's on
separate.
top.
That's separate, correct.
The district's reserves.
Yes.
I didn't see that anywhere. Is that exhausted every year or carried over?
Okay, and his question is, are district reserves exhausted every year? Are they carried over? What happens with the reserves, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Think of reserves like savings accounts. We actually use our savings account every year. We don't exhaust them because that would be a very dangerous thing to do. And here's a good example. Let's say you make $2,000 a month. Take home, we won't get into all the taxes and all that, but let's say you make $2,000 a month, but your bills are $2,500 a month. That's where we're at in the first place. You have a deficit of $500 a month. You can either use all your savings up, or you cut your expenses, one of the two. We do a combination of the two. So we use some of our reserves to support us. Last year, between our reserves and fund balance, we used $1.1 million. But think of it like this. So if you have a $2,000 a month budget, $2,500 expenses, you're using $200 every month out of your savings. And you cut $300 elsewhere, so you're just making it. You can't stop using that $200. Once you stop using that $200, you're $200 in the hole every month. So once we use reserves, we increased our reserve use last year from $700,000 to $1.1 million. We now are saying every year we are committed to using $1.1 million, our savings accounts. And from a conservative standpoint, I would say we don't want to use all our reserves because once that runs out, once you have no more savings, your cuts are dramatic. So we use some reserves. If we're able to build some back up, we do. We try and keep a fair level in there. We've had presentations on reserves before. We will definitely be having them again. It is actually on our website. You can actually go on our website and actually see our
And
reserves
it
as
also
well.
allows you to stay very balanced through the year.
Correct. So if you have spikes and all that, it just keeps you consistent as well. So we do use our reserves. We don't use all of our reserves. I would never advocate using
All
all.
the reserves are on the website outside of the budget?
We've had actually our presentations for our reserve presentations are on the website. Yes, correct.
Okay, last question.
Yes.
Does the district have a specific plan, committee to deal with the shrinking student population?
I'm going to let the superintendent answer that for you.
So this is what some of our administrative conversations sound like. When we start to take a look at the student enrollment, we can start to see where there's a dramatic change. So 140s down to, let's say, 119 in a class, I call them cohorts. Or 119 to 106, to me that's a dramatic shift. 106 to 78 or 80, again, I see that as a dramatic shift. And just Tuesday, that would be yesterday, one of the conversations that we had as an administrative team is now that we see these trends, starting very stable trends, if nothing changes and this trend continues, what we know that we as a district need to do is to reach out to our parents that are in 3rd and 4th and 5th grade and say, okay, what do you want for your children when they reach 7th grade? Right now we're running 3 foreign languages. If we can't do 3 languages because we don't have enough kids, then what 1 or 2 languages do you want? If we can't do all the sports that we're currently offering, then what sports should we keep? What sports should we let go? Small school districts, if the trend stays exactly like it is, we will be a district of about 1,200 students. That's a small district, coming from about 1,800 not very many years ago. Can we fund all the programs that we want to fund? Or do we start to become more like the small school districts that you see farther south in Cattaraugus County, where they don't have teams, they have clubs, where they don't have a course with a teacher, they do it in a different way. It's an independent study or is it distance learning? So we're trying to gear up for all of that too, but really reach out to our parents. And so you're going to start to see some of those committees starting up. We have done an incredible job in this district, given the shrink that we've seen. But I don't know that anyone prior to this thought it would stay this way. But we're not seeing a change in that trend. What we are seeing moving, and Tom alluded to this earlier, the demographic change in Eden is that the population that's moving into Eden is not moving into a home. They're renting. There isn't a development going up. There aren't businesses going up. All of that makes a huge difference. So Glenn Nellis and I have had conversations about it. It's come up at other board meetings. But I think everybody's now starting to see that this is truly a trend. It's not just a shift. Eden will go back up. There's no doubt in my mind. We've done this before in Eden. But we have to ride it out until we can go back up. Does that answer your question?
No.
What?
You don't have an active committee?
We are starting an active committee now. The committee that we do have running is looking forward right here in the budget process, so this is important. Our capital project committee is looking forward to what we need. And now moving forward, as we start to see this trend stay stable, you will start to see in the spring, once we're done with all of this, these committees start to roll up with our younger parents.
Okay, as we're getting close to 7:30, Jen, I know you had a question too.
It's more of a comment, is that okay? I'll be quick.
Sure.
Jen Horschel. I know there's a lot of familiar faces here, but some I haven't seen before, and I'm just going to beg quickly, for those of you who are friends with me on Facebook who know I post stuff constantly, to the point of obnoxiousness, but you need to, if this is something that you feel passionately about, if you're strongly about supporting education, continuing what is a great school district here in our little community, I beg you to write your politicians. They are taking notice. They are pushing forward. David DiPietro is a huge friend of education. He actually hand wrote me a note in response to something that I had wrote to him. He is definitely on board, as is Senator Gallivan. My personal position now is to write to people who I don't reside in their districts, but quite frankly, they make decisions that will impact me. So they are taking notice, they are trying to work in our best interest, but they need to hear from the community. And I know it's hard, I know we all work, and I know we think tomorrow I'll do it, but it has to be now, we have to do it now, because I hate to be doom and gloom, but we are running out of time. I mean, this is a dire situation, not just for Eden, but for all school districts in Western New York. So I have addresses with me, there's sample letters on the PTA website. Anybody's interested, you can find me on Facebook, or I can leave stuff here for people, but that's just my little spiel.
Also, if you don't write, there are pre-written things all over, again, the web and Facebook that are already pre-written, and they just need your signature and your support, and that also helps.
And addresses, we had on our website on the front page, they're still on there. So if you want to know who to write to, I will tell you with the gap elimination adjustment last year, that message was very clear. Those letters went out, the addresses that we provided, it helps. I mean, again, didn't get rid of it, got a little.
But it got attention.
It got attention, and we are getting noticed, so I think that's a great point. We all play a part in letting our elected officials know we actually can have a voice. They just need to hear from as many people as possible. We've got about 3 more minutes. Is there one more question we can get in? And again, if we don't tonight, we have another community forum come up March 14th at 10 a.m. And I, again, would encourage everybody here to sit in our budget advisory team meetings. A lot of what we're talking about here, we are talking about there. And it's designed to be open for everybody, so everyone, we can be as transparent as possible on the budget part.
I do have another question about the veterans exemption. Now, this goes up 2.2%.
Yes.
And some of the veterans will be paying less. Are there some people that are gonna be paying more than 2.2%?
Well, let me take it away from the veterans exemption for a second. It answers your question too, but when we see 2.2%, whether you're a veteran, not a veteran, whoever you are, we have 5 different municipalities in our district. And we have a tax rate for one overall tax rate. But when you equalize them out amongst the 5 different municipalities, it ends up being a little different for every single town person. So whereas one may pay 2.2%, one may, see an increase of 1.9%, one might see an increase of 2.4% because we're equalizing each of the towns. So veteran or no, you're gonna see different people have slightly different tax rates.
But the 2.21 is not
Yeah.
any meaners.
No, 2.21% again is the increase on the overall tax levy. No matter how that's actually distributed, it's the overall tax dollars that come into our district. Okay. Hopefully that is a good start. I know many of you have been here in our budget meetings and many have been here in our board meetings. We want you to be active throughout the process. It's your community, it's your kids, and it's your tax dollars, so you guys have every right to be a part of the process. Hopefully it's a good start, and we've seen some of what goes into the planning part of it. We appreciate you being here tonight. We're gonna head over back to the cafeteria for the board meetings, the brief board